I'm kind of worried because I like to walk around when I'm on stage and I have a very short stage here, so if I fall off, I'm sorry. Before I begin, how many of you are developer advocates here? Love it, okay. So how do you build trust in your community? Does anyone want to take that? I'm going to pick up Jaime.
We offer everything as open docs on the internet and as open source as possible.
I love it. Okay. Who else wants to answer that? Tessa?
We build trust with them by listening to their feedback and doing something.
Okay, awesome. Peter?
Having a place for those people to raise, their concerns or their voice or whatever it is they need, so that they feel heard and a part of it.
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah, go ahead.
Being honest, even if it's not what, in the best interest of the company.
Yeah, I love it. How about being pretty vulnerable? Does that build trust? Yeah. So that's actually my approach. My name's Marino Wijay. I am a platform/developer advocate. There's a little bit of story behind that. If you heard of the term platform engineering, that's why. But I'm also an organizer at this conference called Kuppel, which happened back in Edinburgh last year. And it's happening again in Toronto because I'm running it and I'm really excited about it, so please come. And finally, I'm an ambassador at EddyHub, an open source community that is all about collaboration, community, and what's the last one? Coding, maybe? Maybe a little bit of coding. So, yeah, I'm really excited to be here in Japan talking about how to learn in public because that was my path to DevRel. And that's primarily because there were so many people out there in the community that were already doing it really well, and I just had to copy them. And because I copied them, I'm not going to call all the names up, but you can see them right there. But by copying them, I was able to figure out how I could, serve my community. I don't have a community, but I serve communities in various different spaces, whether you're in the developer space or the DevOps space. And one of the things I realized is everyone in these communities, folks like Rizal, Eddie, Carolyn, they all do something specific for their communities, and you can take from that. You can take from that and form your own path. And so I decided to let's be vulnerable, let's hop into some platform and learn in public together. So how do you learn in public? What is the right mechanism to being able to do so? Quite honestly, it's just about dancing like nobody's watching, because that's the level of vulnerability you can bring to the table, to the conversation, and realize that at the end of the day, no one's really going to care if you misperform or perform badly. But as long as you're able to offer something, offer some sort of value, and then work towards building trust, guess what? People will keep showing up. So that's what I did. I started off my DevRel journey by live streaming because at the time, we didn't have the ability to travel. I started as a developer advocate well over a year ago, and at that time, we had just started to get back into conferences, but no one was really ready for showing up. So I had to figure out another vehicle to be able to just talk about things. So I decided to create a Twitch account and mess around with OBS and try and hope for the best. And quite honestly, it was a learning experience to just get into live streaming. But it was another experience to actually show up on video, and basically, you wouldn't even know who's on the other end. But you're showing up on video, and you're demonstrating something. You're showing how you learn. You're showing your process of, hey, this is how I'm going to go research X, Y, and Z, and ultimately come up with a solution. And maybe I might not have a solution. But one of the interesting things that you start to realize as you dig into this learning in public, is that you're actually putting yourself out there. And it's a very uncomfortable feeling, because now you're showing up to a Twitch stream. You don't know who's on the other end. You don't know if someone's going to show up and actually say that you're doing everything wrong. You really don't know if things are going to go well. And I'm guaranteeing you that a lot of you have experienced something very similar. And so that's a lot of anxiety, which leads to this imposter syndrome. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can show up. And I will tell you that there are times where I was just about to stream, I called it off because that imposter syndrome set off. It just came about, and I'm like, I don't know if I can actually pull through. But there were times where I just did, and guess what? Things work, and then all of a sudden you realize your mic just disconnects from your audio, and then you're speaking into your back mic, which when you actually replay the video, it just sounds so distorted, and you don't realize it to the end until someone tells you about it. But everything's fine. It's all good. Now, one of the things about building a community. And I'm not here to talk about building a community, but I'm here to talk about the fact that community needs something. They need people to come in and advocate, talk about things, teach them things. Because sometimes folks in the community don't know where to go. And so this is why we have the world of developer advocacy and relations, because we have these trusted individuals that go about sharing their thoughts, their processes, their ideas, sharing code, sharing documentation. By the way, this is out of Carolyn's book. By the way, you should go pick it up if you haven't already. It's an excellent book, the DevRel book. But everything is rooted in community. If you aren't focusing on your particular community, how do you know you're even providing value? And it kind of ties back to some of the other presentations that were delivered earlier on, right? How do you justify that you're actually providing value? So learning in public, you actually are providing a tremendous amount of value because you're actually showing up to a party where you don't know who's there, but you're also displaying the fact that things can potentially go wrong, and you're willing to work through those aspects. And this is important because if you keep doing this consistently, you get better at it. You get better to the point that it's like you can show up on a stream on a moment's notice and do your thing and walk away without any problems, unscathed. And I love that because that's where I got to. I got to this point where after doing repetitive streams where sometimes things would go nowhere, I realized that some streams I would hop on, people would show up. I would fail, but they would actually provide guidance. They'd be like, hey, why don't you try this? And they'd be like, assisting me. This is like collaborative. And now we're all kind of working together. And you start to realize, hey, I have a little bit of a community here that wants to show up and wants to learn, wants to participate, and will add value to that conversation. So it's not just, I'm learning by myself. We've got all these other people alongside us. So you have to ask yourself, what does your community want? It's hard to define that. Like, how do you ever know what your community truly needs or wants or what they're looking for? Are they looking for someone to come and talk to them about Kubernetes or Istio or something? No. What they're actually looking for is they're looking for their interesting subject. And you may not be able to provide that to them. So maybe they're not for you. Maybe you have to find another community. Maybe you have to go and keep doing what you do so that your community starts to show up, right? And so the way I look at it is, you want to be a DevRel. You have to think about your niche. You can't just simply take spaghetti, throw it at the wall, and then try everything. Because I'll tell you, this is exactly what I did last year. I decided I was going to stream about Docker. I was going to stream about Kubernetes. I was going to stream about JavaScript, all of a sudden, which is way outside of the domain of what I do. And so when you try to find that niche, it becomes a little difficult. But as you start to narrow it down, you start to notice that particular niche, in my case, it's DevOps and networking and Kubernetes, people actually care about that. It's not the entire population, but it's a good chunk of people that actually want to learn more about it because it's very mysterious to them. And you're there to demystify that. Now, when you find that niche, something that works for you, something that's interesting to you, you have to start trying things. Right? This could be what I did, live streaming on video, or it could be blog posts, or it could be using some sort of form of social media like Twitter to be able to just create tweets or tweet threads. And that's how you start to see more momentum, but also engagement. There's a very, very powerful individual in our AnyHub ambassador community called Pradyumna. And Pradyumna has done a fantastic job of sharing so much information through threads, through Twitter threads. He may not show up on camera all the time, but he's providing value through his own mechanism. And quite honestly, he's also learning in public at the same time because he'll go back, review all those things he's shared with others, and then learn from that himself. And that's so powerful. But you have to decide, okay, if you're going to try something, what's going to be your platform? Is it going to be all platforms? Are you going to use YouTube, Twitch, LinkedIn? Are you going to hop on Twitter? Are you going to also maybe do the TikTok thing? It's a lot to do. For a DevRel, to try and hop into every one of those and then excel is not going to scale very well. So what I decided to do last year was I started to narrow down the things that I actually cared about in the sense of wanting to do it and what I would excel at. And streaming was fun, but at the same time also very challenging because I was starting to realize that I was running out of good topics to talk about. And the only way to really get some really good topics to talk about was to have other guests come up. And so I've been thinking about, okay, maybe I should start planning this out and thinking about a schedule where I can get people on the on the live stream. But I also realized that's not the only place you can do this if you learn in public. You can also show up to conferences and learn in public, because that hallway track that after this conversation is done, after I'm done presenting, means that you're going to learn something or learn about a perspective that someone else just was able to listen to your presentation and start to formulate ideas in their head, and now they're going to share that back with you. And that is how you actually learn in public, because now you're engaging with your audience. You're able to see, what they care about. You're also able to, understand their needs, their wants. Going back to that point of what does your community want? Well, they're here telling you about it. And so you can think about a combination of all of these different platforms to be able to learn, right? You can hop on a Twitter space with Abby and say, hey, we're going to talk a little bit about, what DevRel is. And I think we do that occasionally. Not all the time, but we hop on a Twitter space, talk about DevRel, and we start the conversation off, and then Eddie shows up, and then Peter might show up, and then others might show up, and then add more value. And then you start to walk away with all these additional points of, hey, I didn't realize this about DevRel. Joel's presentation, for example. Things I wish I was doing as a DevRel on the daily, but I am not. And, made me realize that there are gaps in the way I work. And so coming to a conference is how you learn in public. So I say that all to say that when you think about learning in public, you also have to be consistent. Consistency is hard, especially when things get harder. The next task that you're going to do is twice as hard as the last task. And so that's very anxiety-inducing, to be honest. But guess what? Remember what I said about you doing this on Twitch and then your community showing up to help you out? That's all it's about, right? You don't want to do everything yourself because you can never truly know everything. But if you engage your community, if you work with them, if you allow them to participate in all of your learning in public, well, it's accelerated learning. So the other interesting thing, though, is as you're working towards your community, as you're working to serve them, you're getting feedback. That's that feedback loop that closes everything off and says, keep doing what you're doing, because if you stop, then it all starts to fall apart and crumble. But if you keep doing it, and if you have that community behind you, backing you, supporting you, guess what? You'll become better. You'll continue to learn better in public. So I say this all to say that there was one particular community member out there who has been very amazing at learning public. If you've ever heard of 90 Days of DevOps, Michael Cade actually decided to say, I'm going to learn all things about DevOps in public. I'm going to open up a Git repo. I'm going to store this all in Git. I'm going to work on it day by day by day. And maybe I might not be right, but guess what? There are going to be folks in the community that actually show up and file pull requests and say, hey, maybe you should adjust this. And that's how you continue to learn. But that inspired me to create something called 70 Days of Service Mesh, where I just decided, let me take the service mesh technology, break it down to 70 days, and just start writing stuff. Things that I know, things that I'll go research, and then publish this on GitHub. Or whatever, I chose GitHub, but whatever platform is yours, you can go ahead and choose. And the interesting phenomenon that happened was, there were folks from competitor companies that I work against, right? And I don't compete in the community, but folks that from competitor companies that came in and said, hey, I got to file a pull request because there's some incorrect information. And I love that because I didn't know the right information, but they came in and corrected it for me. And that's an excellent way to learn in public. So I bring this all to a conclusion in the sense that if you really want to learn in public, there's a few ways you can. Obviously, you can go to the attractive technologies out there like Kubernetes and even Istio if you want to, and join that open source community there and really contribute. But I think fundamentally, if you want to learn better and accelerate your learning in public, join a community. I joined AnyHub primarily because there were a lot of gaps that I had in Git. And guess what? I asked those questions, and people like Lockwow or Dean, I should really call them that, as well as Verduna show up and have answers for questions that I never would even thought I'd be able to solve. And so I recommend to all of you, if you're trying to learn in public, do it with a community. Join a community and do it in the open, because guess what? No one is going to be tearing you down. Everyone, well, there might be a few trolls out there, and I'll be honest, they suck, but quite honestly, you're pretty much in the protection of a strong community that has guidelines, that has strong codes of conduct to make sure that none of this harassment happens. So you're in a safe space to be able to learn in public. And I love that about anyhow. So I just want to say thank you all for jumping in and listening in about learning in public. I know it's not an extensive presentation. I didn't need to really go too deep. I didn't want to go technical either. But I wanted to point out that everyone can do it, right? If you're shy in front of a camera, I know it's daunting at first, and it was very much so for me. But the more and more I did it, it became easier because I began to realize that everyone is there to get something out of this. They're not there to bring you down. They're there to just learn alongside you. So I encourage you all to try it out. Thank you very much, and thank you so much, DevRelCon.